NATO is prepared to continue our training and capacity building when the situation permits. We remain strongly committed to the fight against international terrorism. At our meeting today, the United States also briefed on the regional situation following recent attacks on coalition forces in Iraq and the strike against General Soleimani. For years, all allies have expressed concern about Iran's destabilizing activities in the wider Middle East region. We agree Iran must never acquire a nuclear weapon. We share concern about Iran's missile tests.
Yes, it was a very brief press conference by Jens Stoltenberg, the NATO Secretary General. He had convened this emergency meeting of NATO's 29 ambassadors to discuss the rising tensions between the United States and Iran, to discuss the situation. Now, of course, the United States is a NATO member, and Stoltenberg said that there was a briefing by the US ambassador to the other ambassadors to really talk about Washington's perspective, why it had carried out this action against General Soleimani. Stoltenberg said he couldn't share the information that the US ambassador had given with, of course, the press, but he said that NATO members felt that they had been, NATO ambassadors, I should say, felt that they had been adequately briefed. He said also that in the past, NATO allies had been very concerned by Iran's actions in the region, which he called destabilizing, that in the past NATO has condemned some of those actions, but he did say that all NATO members were really quite united in calling for a de-escalation of tensions, trying to urge all sides to show some restraint. Now, in terms of the NATO military, the NATO troops that are actually in Iraq, this was one of the big questions going into this meeting. What will happen to the NATO mission in Iraq? Well, Stoltenberg said that although operations have been suspended, those troops are in Iraq training Iraqi soldiers in counter-ISIL operations and combat. He said that NATO had suspended that mission, but that it wants to continue that mission. It was very important work. And he said that those NATO forces are, of course, in Iraq at the request of the Iraqi government. Now, we know that the Iraqi parliament recently requested all foreign troops to leave the country. Stoltenberg said for the time being, those NATO troops will remain there. So it's not really clear what will happen, but he said that NATO allies were very intent on trying to keep that mission in place.
So the Secretary General said that the US provided the rationale for the attack. And it seemed that NATO members were happy with what they heard, but he couldn't tell us, the public, what that rationale was, but went on to say that Iran must refrain from further violence and escalation.
That's right. Stoltenberg made it very clear that in the past, NATO has repeatedly called upon Iran to show restraint, has condemned Iran for what Stoltenberg said was destabilizing actions in the region, destabilizing influence. Now, of course, Stoltenberg said that he couldn't share with us, with the public, with the press, exactly what had gone on in that room between those ambassadors. You can only imagine it would have been a very interesting conversation indeed, as the US ambassador explained exactly what was the game plan, perhaps, the strategy behind the US decision to kill General Soleimani. But Stoltenberg said that allies were very allies said that they were united in understanding why this had taken place. Now, what the opinions were beyond that, we don't know. Only that NATO ambassadors have said that they are united in calling for restraint, for a de-escalation of tensions, because nobody wants to see, said Stoltenberg, an all-out conflict.